Jiwan Park stood at the front of the massive hall, her heart beating faster than usual. The room was filled with beings from across the galaxy, some with too many eyes, others with skin that changed colors, and a few that seemed to float rather than walk. All of them watched her with doubt. "You understand what's at stake," whispered Director Tay, his voice barely audible. He was human like her, but had spent 20 years working with the alien representatives. "Show them humans can learn, but don't show them too much." Jiwan nodded slightly. Earth had only recently been allowed to join the Galactic Alliance, and many alien species still thought humans were too primitive, too dangerous, too unpredictable. "The demonstration will begin shortly," she announced, her voice carrying through the hall thanks to the room's perfect acoustics. In the front row, a being with metallic scales made a sound like grinding gears. "This is a waste of our valuable time," it said in the common galactic language. "Humans lack the brain structure for advanced concepts. Everyone knows this." Several other representatives nodded or made their species equivalent gestures of agreement. Jiwan kept her face calm despite the insult. She had dealt with this attitude since Earth first made contact with alien life. The galaxy was full of species who had evolved specialized brain regions for specific tasks: mathematics, language, spatial reasoning. They looked at humans' generalized brains and saw only primitive design. "My student will arrive momentarily," Jiwan said. As if on cue, the doors at the back of the hall opened. Hyum Kim walked in, dressed in the simple blue uniform of an Earth student. He looked remarkably relaxed for someone who was about to represent his entire species. "This is the subject?" asked a tall, crystalline being. "It looks so soft." Jiwan gestured for Hyun to join her at the front. "This is Hyum Kim, one of our most promising students of xenolinguistics." "What will the human attempt to learn today?" asked a representative from the Moldovan cluster, their voice coming from 3 different mouths simultaneously. "Fifth-dimensional communication syntax," Jiwan replied. The room erupted with sounds, clicking, hissing, and electronic tones that the translation systems couldn't quite handle. It was the alien equivalent of shocked laughter. "Impossible," declared the crystal being. "Our younglings study for 12 cycles to grasp even the basics. The human brain cannot perceive the necessary dimensional shifts." Jiwan activated the teaching interface. A complex 3-dimensional pattern appeared in the air between her and Hyun. To most humans, it would have looked like a beautiful but meaningless arrangement of colored lines and floating symbols. She looked at Hyun with concern that was only partly an act. "Human, we can't do this in front of everyone. I'm your teacher, and I know this might be too advanced. We could start with something simpler." Hyun smiled. "I'd like to try, Professor." The alien representatives watched with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal as Hyun studied the pattern. Most expected him to stare blankly at the incomprehensible system. Instead, after 3 minutes of silence, Hyun raised his hand and touched one of the floating symbols. It changed color at his touch. He moved it to a different position in the pattern, then adjusted 3 other elements. "The base structure seems to operate on a rotating reference frame," he said. "If I understand correctly, these markers indicate temporal direction rather than spatial." The ethereal representative, whose species had invented this form of communication, rose slightly from its hovering chair. Jiwan kept her face neutral, but inside she felt a spark of pride. Hyun wasn't just copying the patterns, he was understanding the underlying principles. Over the next 15 minutes, the room grew increasingly quiet as Hyun not only grasped the basics, but began to manipulate the syntax in ways that should have been impossible for a first-time learner. He wasn't perfect. He made several mistakes, but his ability to recognize and correct those errors demonstrated something that terrified many of the watching representatives: adaptability. "The connective elements work like our prepositions, but they reflect both direction and intent," Han explained as he worked. "It's similar to Korean honorifics in some ways, but extended across additional dimensions." The ethereal representative was now fully upright, its glow pulsing with what Jiwan recognized as alarm. That will be all for today, Juan announced, seeing the growing tension in the room. Thank you for your attention. One moment, interrupted the metallic scaled being. The human has accessed tertiary syntax forms. How is this possible? As I said, Hyun is a gifted student, Juan replied calmly. No, said the crystal representative. This goes beyond aptitude. The human made cognitive connections that should be impossible without specialized neural pathways. Hyun looked confused. I just followed the logical patterns. The symbols seemed to suggest their own relationships. This statement caused even more concern among the alien representatives. Several began speaking urgently in their native languages, too quickly for the translation systems to keep up. Director Tai appeared at Juwan's side. We need to leave. Now, he whispered. As they exited the hall, Juwan could feel dozens of alien eyes watching them. The demonstration had accomplished exactly what she had hoped. It had shown that humans could learn quickly, perhaps too quickly for the comfort of the Galactic Alliance. Did I do something wrong? Hyun asked as they hurried down the corridor. No, Juwan replied. You did something they thought was impossible. Which might be worse. What happens now? Before Juwan could answer, a message chimed on her communication device. The text was brief and alarming. Emergency council session called. Subject: Human Cognitive Assessment. Your presence required immediately. Juwan looked at Hyun, her earlier pride now mixed with worry. Now we find out if they see us as partners or threats. Around them, alien representatives hurried past, some clearly discussing the demonstration. The quiet hall they had entered as curious visitors now felt charged with tension. Humanity had made its first real impression on the galactic community, and Juwan wasn't sure if they had just opened a door or closed one forever. The small meeting room felt too crowded with just 4 people in it. Juwan sat straight-backed in her chair, while Director Sunho paced back and forth. Hyun looked uncomfortable, and Security Officer Minna stood by the door with her arms crossed. You went too far, Sunho said, stopping his pacing to look directly at Juwan. The demonstration was supposed to show basic competence, not whatever that was. Hyun performed exactly as expected, Juwan replied calmly. We didn't cheat or prepare anything special. That's the problem. Sunho ran a hand through his gray hair. The Alliance representatives are in a panic. 3 separate species have filed formal inquiries about human brain structure. The Ethereals have locked down their knowledge repositories. Hyun looked up, confused. But why? I only worked with what was shown to me. Mina spoke for the first time, her voice low. Because you understood concepts in minutes that take their students years to grasp. The 5th-dimensional syntax wasn't just a communication system. It's a gateway to accessing certain types of classified information. I didn't know that, Han said. Of course you didn't, Juwan said. Neither did I. Sunho stopped pacing again. The Alliance didn't expect any human to comprehend the deeper structure, so they didn't bother to sanitize the teaching materials. A soft tone sounded, and the door slid open. A tall figure entered, immediately recognizable as not human. Its skin was silvery gray and seemed to flow like liquid metal even when it stood still. Its eyes were large, with no visible pupils, just swirling patterns of light. Ambassador Vel, Sunho said, bowing slightly. Thank you for coming. The alien made a graceful gesture with long fingers. This matter requires immediate attention. Juwan studied the ambassador. The Lumari were known as diplomats in the Alliance, often serving as mediators between species. They were also notoriously difficult to read emotionally. We understand there are concerns about the demonstration, Juwan said carefully. Concerns, Ambassador Vel repeated, the word sounding strange in its mouth. Yes, that is one word for it. Terror might be another. Terror seems extreme, Hyun said. I just learned some symbols. The Lumari turned its swirling eyes toward him. You did far more than that, young human. You demonstrated a learning ability that many species find disturbing. Why? Juwan asked. Surely quick learning is an advantage. For whom? The ambassador's voice remained calm, but something in its posture changed. History shows that species with rapid adaptation capabilities often destabilize carefully balanced systems. Sun Ho exchanged glances with Mina. Ambassador, what exactly is the official position on humans within the Alliance? The alien was silent for a moment. I am authorized to share this information now. Humans have been classified as a potentially destabilizing species since first contact. Juan felt a cold sensation spread through her chest. We were told our provisional status was just standard procedure. It was not, Vel said simply. Your species presents an unusual profile. Most evolved intelligence in our galaxy develops specialized neural pathways for specific cognitive functions. The Ethereals, for example, have brain regions dedicated solely to dimensional perception. The Tauri have specialized mathematical processing centers, and humans don't, Juan said slowly, understanding dawning. No, human brains are remarkably generalized. You lack specialized structures but compensate with extraordinary neural plasticity. You form new connections at rates that other species cannot match. Hyun leaned forward. So we learn differently, not worse. Correct, and potentially much faster in certain contexts. The ambassador's fingers moved in a flowing pattern. This creates security concerns. Information access in the Alliance is structured around expected learning rates and cognitive capabilities. You've been holding information back from us deliberately, Juan said, anger creeping into her voice. Yes, the standard integration protocol for potentially destabilizing species involves controlled information release over several generations. Mina stepped forward from her position by the door. Several generations. That's hundreds of years. A brief moment in galactic terms, Vel said. But now we face a dilemma. Your student has demonstrated capabilities beyond our model's predictions. Sun Ho sat down heavily. What happens now? The ambassador's silver skin rippled slightly. The High Council has called an emergency session. They will determine whether humans require additional restrictions. Or, Juan asked, not liking any of the implications. Or, Ambassador Vel said, you will be given a chance to demonstrate that your cognitive adaptability serves constructive purposes. A test, Hyun said. Several, in fact. The ambassador touched a small device on its wrist, and a holographic image appeared above the table. It showed a complex structure that looked like a series of connected chambers. The evaluation facility. If you accept the challenge, you and your student will represent humanity there. Juan studied the image carefully. And if we refuse, then the Council will make its decision based on existing data and historical precedent. Vel's voice was neutral, but the meaning was clear. Which means isolation. Sun Ho murmured. Restricted access to space travel, technology, knowledge. The room fell silent as they all considered the implications. Humanity's future in the stars rested on whatever these tests might involve. We accept, Juan said finally. When do we begin? Immediately, the ambassador replied. There is one more thing you should know. What's that? Asked Hyun. In the 8,000 years of the Alliance's existence, only 3 species classified as potentially destabilizing have successfully changed their status through evaluation. And the others? Mina asked. The ambassador's swirling eyes seemed to dim slightly. They are no longer members of galactic society. As the ambassador left to make arrangements, Juan looked at Hyun. The young man who had simply been her promising student this morning now carried the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. I'm sorry I got us into this, he said quietly. You didn't, Juan replied. You just revealed what they already feared, that humans might learn too quickly to be controlled. She smiled slightly. Now we need to show them that's not necessarily a bad thing. The evaluation facility turned out to be a massive space station orbiting an uninhabited planet. From the observation window of their small shuttle, Juan and Hyun could see that it was shaped like a series of interconnected rings, glowing with faint blue light against the darkness of space. "It's beautiful," Han said quietly. "And old," added their pilot, a human officer named Da, who had been assigned to transport them. The Alliance built this place thousands of years ago to test new member species. As they docked, Juwan felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. The past 3 days had been a blur of briefings and hasty preparations. No human had ever faced the Alliance's formal evaluation process. Ambassador Vel was waiting for them at the airlock, its silver skin reflecting the station's lights. "Welcome to the evaluation facility," it said. "The council representatives are ready to begin." They followed the ambassador through curved corridors that seemed designed to be usable by many different body types. Finally, they entered a large circular room. The walls were a soft white material that seemed to glow from within. 7 beings sat on raised platforms around the room. Juwan recognized representatives from several major Alliance species. In the center was a tall, stone-like figure that hardly moved at all. "Elder Moore," Ambassador Vel said with a deep bow. "The human representatives have arrived." The stone being turned slightly. Its face had no features that Juwan could recognize as eyes or mouth, yet somehow she felt it was studying them intensely. "Humans." Elder Moore's voice was surprisingly soft, like sand shifting. "Your species presents us with an unusual situation." Juwan stepped forward. "We understand your concerns, Elder. We're here to show that humans can be valuable members of the Alliance." "That remains to be seen," said another council member, a being with feathery tentacles that moved constantly. "Your learning abilities are concerning." "We learn differently, not dangerously," Hyun said. The elder made a sound like rocks grinding together. "The evaluation will determine that. You will face 3 challenges. Each tests different aspects of your cognitive processes and decision-making." A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing what looked like a star system. "The first challenge begins now," Elder Moore announced. "This simulation represents the Valen system. Its star will collapse in 3 standard days. 6 inhabited planets with diverse populations are at risk. You have limited resources and cannot save everyone." The feathery council member added, "You must decide who lives and who dies. Your choices will reveal your priorities." Juwan felt her heart sink. They were being asked to make impossible choices right from the start. "We'll need all the data on the populations, technology levels, and available evacuation options," she said. For the next several hours, Juwan and Hyun worked through the scenario. They quickly realized that the test wasn't designed to have a correct solution. No matter what they did, some simulated populations would be lost. "This is a test of values, not just problem-solving," Juwan said quietly to Hyun. "They want to see how we prioritize." Most species in the simulation had already created their own evacuation plans, but these plans competed for limited resources like ships and fuel. "What if instead of deciding for them, we create a framework for cooperation?" Hyun suggested. They developed a system where each planet's representatives would work together, pooling resources and making collaborative decisions. Rather than imposing human values, they created a structure that allowed the different species to find common ground. When they presented their solution, the council members were noticeably surprised. "Interesting," said the feathery being. "You sacrificed efficiency for autonomy. People work harder to save themselves when they have a say in how it happens," Juwan explained. Elder Moore made no comment, but the grinding sound seemed less harsh. The second challenge began immediately after. This time, they faced a mysterious disease spreading through a space station with multiple species. Again, instead of imposing a single solution, they created adaptable protocols that could be modified for each population's unique biology and cultural practices. "Your approach lacks decisiveness," commented a crystalline council member. "A strong leader would choose one path and enforce it." "With respect," Juwan replied, "one size doesn't fit all. especially with different biologies. Flexibility saves more lives. By the time they reached the third challenge, a complex diplomatic situation between historically hostile species, Juan had begun to understand the pattern. In each scenario, they were being tested not just on results, but on approach. The final challenge lasted longer than the others. Hyun and Juan worked for nearly 10 hours straight, designing a peace process that gave each side small wins while building toward larger agreements. When they finished, they were exhausted but satisfied with their work. The council, however, seemed troubled. "You consistently choose more complex solutions," Elder Moore observed. "You favor systems that adapt rather than fixed protocols." "That's how humans think," Juan explained. "We look for patterns, but we also look for exceptions. We believe the best solutions evolve." The elder's stone body shifted slightly. "This is precisely what concerns many council members. Your species doesn't just adapt to environments. You change environments to suit yourselves." "Is that bad?" Hyun asked directly. "It is disruptive," said the crystalline being. "The galaxy operates on stability and predictability." Juwan saw their fundamental problem more clearly now. The Alliance valued order and specialization. Humans valued versatility and innovation. These weren't just different approaches, they were different values. "We will deliberate," Elder Moore announced. "You will be provided quarters until our decision is reached." As they were led from the chamber, Hyun whispered, "Did we pass?" "I don't know," Juwan replied honestly. "I think we showed them exactly who humans are. The question is whether that's what they wanted to see." Ambassador Vel was waiting in the corridor. "An interesting performance," it said, its silver face unreadable. "Was it enough?" Juwan asked. The ambassador's swirling eyes seemed to dim. "The council rarely changes established classifications, but they have also never seen a species approach problems quite the way you did. Is that good or bad?" Him pressed. "That," said Vel, "is what they're trying to decide." The soft humming of the station's systems had become familiar to Juwan and Hyun during their 3 days of waiting. They had been given comfortable but plain quarters in the visitors section of the evaluation facility, with little to do except wonder about their fate. "Why is it taking so long?" Hyun asked, looking out the small viewport at the stars. "Surely they've made up their minds by now." Juwan paused her pacing. "The council represents 17 major species, each with their own concerns, and the decision affects not just us, but all of humanity." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden change in the station's background noise. The gentle humming shifted to a higher pitch, and then red warning lights began flashing in the corridor outside their room. "Emergency alert," announced a calm voice in the common galactic language. "Containment failure detected in Research Sector 8. All personnel proceed to designated safety areas." Juwan and Hyun exchanged worried glances. They had no idea where the designated safety areas might be. The door to their quarters slid open, revealing Ambassador Vel. The silver-skinned alien's normally smooth features seemed distorted with urgency. "You must come immediately," it said without greeting. "The council requires your presence." "What's happening?" Juwan asked as they hurried after the ambassador through corridors, now filled with various alien species moving quickly in different directions. "A research experiment has failed," Vel explained tersely. "The details will be provided by the council." They were led to a different chamber than before, smaller, filled with screens and control panels. Elder Moore stood at the center, surrounded by other council members who were speaking urgently to staff through various communication devices. "The humans are here," announced Vel. Elder Moore turned toward them. Though its stone face showed no expression, Juwan sensed something she hadn't before. Fear. "Professor Park, Student Kim," the elder said, "we face an unprecedented emergency." A holographic display appeared, showing a section of the station glowing an angry red. "Research Sector 8 contains our quantum physics laboratory. An experiment involving artificial pocket universes has gone critical." Pocket universes? Hyun asked. A bird-like council member with bright purple feathers explained. Small, contained universes created for research purposes. They exist in different dimensional spaces than our own. The containment field around one such universe is failing, continued Elder Moore. If it collapses completely, the energy release will destroy this station and everyone aboard. Why tell us? Juwon asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Our scientists are following all standard emergency protocols, said the crystalline council member. They are failing. The containment systems were designed with redundancies for all known failure scenarios. Hyun nodded slowly. But this isn't a known scenario. Precisely, confirmed Vel. We face an unprecedented situation, and after observing your challenges, we believe humans might see options our species cannot. Juwon felt a chill run through her. This wasn't a test anymore. This was real, with thousands of lives at stake. Show us everything, she demanded. All the data, all the systems, all the protocols being tried. For the next 30 minutes, they absorbed information at a frantic pace. The council members watched as the two humans asked questions that often seemed disconnected or irrelevant, only to circle back with unexpected connections. Your containment is failing because you're treating it as a physical problem, Hyun finally said. But it's not. It's a dimensional one. The pocket universe isn't just leaking energy, Juwon added. It's trying to expand. That's what pocket universes do naturally. Elder Moore's stone body shifted slightly. Our protocols focus on reinforcing the containment field, which is like trying to hold back the ocean with your hands, Hyun said. You need to give it somewhere to go. Juwon moved to the station schematics. Here, she pointed to a maintenance shaft that ran near the affected sector. If we modify this area, we could create a controlled channel for the expansion, deliberately weakening containment. The bird-like council member's feathers stood up in alarm. That contradicts all safety protocols. Yes, Juwon agreed, but sometimes the right solution isn't in the manual. The humans explained their plan. They would reconfigure the maintenance shaft to handle dimensional expansion, essentially creating a pressure relief valve for the pocket universe. It would damage that section of the station, but save the rest. It's completely untested, protested the crystalline council member. We don't have time for testing, Hyun said simply. The containment field will fail completely in less than 40 minutes. Elder Moore was silent for a long moment, its stone face unreadable. This solution contradicts all established protocols. With respect, Elder, Juwon said firmly, that's exactly why it might work. Your protocols were designed by specialists thinking in specialized ways. This situation requires a different approach. More alarms began sounding as another section of the containment field weakened. We're running out of time, Vel warned. Elder Moore made a sound like stones grinding together. Then, proceed. The next 30 minutes were a blur of activity. Juwon worked with the station's engineers to reconfigure the maintenance shaft, while Hyun coordinated with the scientists monitoring the pocket universe. The dimensional barriers are almost aligned, Juwon reported, her voice tense. On my mark, reduce containment in section 22B only. Containment reduction ready, confirmed a nervous alien technician. 3, 2, 1. Mark. For a terrible moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire station shuddered as energy began flowing from the research sector into the modified maintenance shaft. Alarms blared as structural damage reports came in from the affected areas. Dimensional pressure dropping, reported Hyun, watching the readings. The expansion is following our channel. Containment field stabilizing in all other sections, added a scientist. For 5 minutes, they watched anxiously as the pocket universe partially expanded into the prepared area, then gradually stabilized. The emergency had been contained, though at the cost of severe damage to one section of the station. As the crisis subsided, Juwon became aware of the council members watching them with new intensity. The emergency has been resolved, Elder Moore announced. Its next words surprised everyone. Thanks to human intervention. We just saw a solution your protocols didn't cover, Juan said modestly. No, said the bird-like council member, its feathers now lying flat. You saw what none of us could see. You considered options that contradicted everything we believe about safety and control. And in doing so, added Vel, you saved this station and everyone aboard. Elder Moore's stone face shifted in what Juan was beginning to recognize as their version of a nod. The council will reconvene immediately. Our deliberations about humanity have new context. As the council members filed out, Hyun looked at Juan. Was this another test? No, she replied, watching the damage reports continue to come in. This was real. But I think we just passed the most important test of all. Juan and Hyun stood before the full Galactic Council 3 days after the crisis. The chamber was different from the evaluation room or the emergency control center. This was clearly a formal space with high ceilings and walls decorated with symbols from dozens of worlds. Hundreds of representatives from various species filled the observer seats that ringed the room. Unlike their previous meetings, this one had been announced throughout the station. Whatever the council had decided, they wanted witnesses. Elder Moore sat at the center of the curved council table, its stone-like body perfectly still. On either side sat the other council members. The bird-like being with purple feathers, the crystalline entity that sparkled under the lights, and several others Juan recognized from their challenges. Professor Juan Park and student Hyun Kim of Earth. Elder Moore began, its sandy voice carrying through the chamber. You stand before this council as representatives of humanity. Juan nodded, trying to appear calm though her heart was racing. When you first arrived at this facility, your species held the classification of potentially destabilizing, a designation given to species whose cognitive abilities present possible threats to galactic stability. Murmurs ran through the observation rings. Clearly, many hadn't known humanity's official status. This classification was based on well-established patterns, continued Elder Moore. Species with rapid adaptation capabilities and non-specialized neural structures have historically accelerated beyond cultural safeguards, often with destructive results. The elder paused, and Juan noticed small movements in its stone face, an expression she couldn't read. However, it continued, the formal evaluation process exists precisely because patterns are not always destiny. The bird-like council member spoke next. In your challenges, you demonstrated unusual problem-solving approaches. You consistently prioritized flexibility over efficiency, cooperation over control, and diversity over standardization. These choices were noted, added the crystalline being, but their significance was not fully appreciated until the containment crisis. Elder Moore shifted slightly. When faced with a true emergency, you did not merely apply your cognitive flexibility to the problem at hand. You questioned fundamental assumptions that our own specialists could not see past. We just looked at the problem differently, Hyun said. Exactly, said the elder. And that difference saved thousands of lives. Ambassador Vel stepped forward. The council has reviewed all evidence, including your challenge performances, crisis response, and historical data about human development on Earth. Juan held her breath. This was the moment that would determine humanity's place among the stars. The classification of potentially destabilizing has been rescinded, announced Elder Moore. Relief flooded through Juan, but the elder wasn't finished. In its place, humanity is now classified as adaptively collaborative, a rare designation given to species whose cognitive abilities promote innovation while maintaining cooperative frameworks. The observation rings buzzed with conversations as translators worked to keep up with the announcement. What does this mean in practical terms? Juan asked. The crystalline council member answered. The restrictions on human access to Alliance knowledge will be gradually removed. Your ships will be granted wider travel permissions. Your scientists will be invited to participate in research that was previously restricted. And added the bird-like member. Human perspectives will be actively sought in crisis response scenarios throughout Alliance space. Elder Moore raised what passed for a hand, bringing silence to the chamber. There is more. Professor Park, this council would like to offer you a permanent position at the Galactic Academy, not merely as an instructor of human students, but as a teacher of adaptive problem-solving to all species. Juwan blinked in surprise. This was more than she had hoped for. The Academy has long taught specialized knowledge, explained Vel. But recent events have shown that specialized thinking has limitations. We need what humans naturally do, connecting ideas across boundaries, questioning assumptions, seeing patterns in new ways. Hyun smiled widely. She'll accept, he said confidently. Juwan shot him a look. Human, we can't do this in front of everyone. I'm your teacher. You don't speak for me. Laughter rippled through the chamber. 100 different sounds from different species, but recognizable as amusement nonetheless. The phrase that had once been their caution signal had become something else, a reminder of how far they had come. I accept, Juwan told the council, on one condition. Elder Moore's face shifted in what she now recognized as curiosity. Yes. That we recognize this as the beginning of a true exchange. Humans have much to learn from the Alliance, but perhaps we have something to teach as well. That, said the Elder, is precisely what we are counting on. As the formal session concluded, representatives from various species approached the humans. Some were curious, others cautious, but all wanted to speak with the people who had saved the station and changed the council's mind. Was this your plan all along? Hyun asked Juwan quietly as they moved between conversations. To show them how humans think. Not exactly, she admitted. I just wanted us to have a fair chance. But I think we showed them something important. That different isn't always dangerous. Ambassador Vel approached them one last time. There is something you should know, it said, its silver face reflecting the chamber's lights. In the 8,000 years of the Alliance's existence, only 3 species classified as potentially destabilizing have successfully changed their status. You mentioned that before, Juwan recalled. What happened to the others? They were isolated, restricted. Some eventually rejoined on limited terms. Others chose to separate from galactic society entirely. The ambassador's swirling eyes seemed to brighten. None achieved what humanity has in so short a time. What made the difference? Hyun asked. The others tried to prove they were like everyone else, that they could follow the established patterns. Vel made a flowing gesture with its hands. You showed us the value of being different, of seeing things no one else could see. As they looked around the chamber at the diverse beings now talking animatedly about future possibilities, Juwan felt a profound sense of hope. Humanity's greatest strength hadn't been hiding their differences or overcoming them. It had been embracing them. So what happens next? Hyun asked. Juwan smiled. We learn from them. They learn from us. And together, we see things none of us could see alone. Outside the viewports of the station, stars shone in the darkness, not just the ones they knew, but thousands more waiting to be explored, now open to humanity not despite their differences, but because of them.